You lose your phone for 10 minutes and your chest tightens. You misplace your keys and your whole body goes into a low hum of panic. Now imagine losing the person who kept you alive. Not your job, not your routine. The person who fed you when you couldn't feed yourself. That happened constantly for most of human history. And what your ancestors did next is far stranger than a funeral. They didn't just bury their dead, they negotiated with them. Go back 100,000 years. A small group of humans in what is now Israel places a body in a shallow pit. They curl the limbs inward, almost like sleep. They surround the head with red ochre, a mineral pigment ground into powder. This is one of the earliest deliberate burials ever found at a site called Kafse. Archaeologist Arella Hovers, who studied ochre use in the region, has argued that this pigment likely carried symbolic weight, not practical use. Red, the color of blood, of life, smeared onto a body that no longer has any? Why would you do that? Your ancestors had no writing, no religion in the way you'd recognize it, but they had a problem you still have. A person who mattered was suddenly, permanently absent, and the human mind does not process absence well. Here's the strange part. Grief itself may be a kind of prediction error. Neuroscientist Mary Frances O'Connor, who has spent years studying the brain during bereavement, describes grief as your brain's attachment system refusing to update. Your brain built a model of the world that includes this person. It expects them at the door. It expects their voice. When they don't arrive again and again, the model doesn't break instantly. It breaks slowly, painfully, one failed prediction at a time. Your ancestors didn't have neuroscience, but they had ritual. And ritual, it turns out, is a tool for updating a broken model. Think about what a funeral actually does. You gather, you speak the person's name out loud, past tense, you watch the body go into the ground or onto the fire or out to sea. Every culture varies the details, but almost every culture insists on one thing: a physical, irreversible act witnessed by a group. This is not decoration, this is data. Your brain needs proof. Consider Neanderthals. For decades, scientists debated whether they buried their dead intentionally at all. Then came Shanidar Cave in Iraq, where researcher Emma Pomeroy and her colleagues re-excavated a partial skeleton in 2018 and found new evidence of a deliberate, arranged burial, with clustered pollen suggesting flowers may have been placed nearby. Even if you set aside the flower question, which remains debated, the body's position wasn't accidental. It was placed, curled, cared for. Why would a species without your capacity for abstract language bother? Because you don't need language to feel the wrongness of a body left where it fell. You need something more basic: attachment. Neanderthals lived in small bands. They depended on each other absolutely. When someone died, the group didn't just lose a person, it lost a hunter, a caregiver, a piece of its own survival machinery. Marking that loss wasn't sentimentality. It may have been a way of processing a structural rupture in the group itself. Now fast forward. By 30,000 years ago, burials get elaborate. At Sungir in Russia, two children were buried head-to-head, covered in thousands of ivory beads that would have taken, by some estimates, thousands of hours to make. Thousands of hours for beads that would go straight into the ground, never to be seen again. That should stop you. Why would a small, resource-strapped group of hunter-gatherers spend that much labor on something with zero practical return? Unless the return wasn't practical, unless the beads were never for the dead at all. They were for the living, for the people who needed somehow to make an unbearable loss feel like it meant something. You still do this. You spend money you don't have on a funeral. You choose a specific song. You write something you'll read once out loud through tears. None of it changes the outcome. All of it changes how you carry the outcome. There's a darker thread here, too. Some early burials show something like fear. Bodies weighted down with stones, positioned face down. Anthropologists studying various prehistoric and early historic sites have proposed that certain unusual burial postures may reflect an attempt to prevent the dead from returning. Not every ancient culture believed death was simply an ending. Many believed it was a transition, and transitions can go wrong. The dead might come back, they might be angry, they might want something. That fear isn't primitive superstition you've outgrown. It's a rougher version of something you still feel. Have you ever avoided a dead relative's chair, kept their voicemail because deleting it felt like a second death? You're not being irrational. You're running the same old software. Your brain isn't fully convinced the connection is over, even when you know, factually, that it is. Psychologist John Bowlby, who developed attachment theory in the mid-20th century, argued that grief follows the same architecture as a child's separation anxiety: searching, yearning, anger. Eventually, reorganization. He wasn't describing something new. He was naming something your ancestors had been managing with ochre and beads and shallow graves for 100,000 years before anyone had a word for psychology. So what did ancient humans actually do when someone they loved died? They performed the loss, loudly, physically, collectively. They didn't leave grief inside the skull alone to be quietly managed. They dragged it outside the body and turned it into an event the whole group had to witness together. A burial wasn't just disposal, it was proof, shared proof, that something real had ended. You've lost that collective weight, mostly. Grief today often happens in private. A few days off work, a phone that stops ringing, no group waiting outside your door to carry the weight with you the way a Paleolithic band would have. Maybe that's why modern grief can feel so isolating. Not because the emotion changed, because the container around it got smaller. Here's the thing about your chest tightening over a lost phone. It's the same system. Threat detection, wired for attachment, misfiring on an object because it's the closest thing available. Scale that system up to an actual person, someone who shared food with you, warmth with you, 40,000 years of evolutionary history compressed into one relationship, and you get grief. Ancient, unfixable, necessary grief. Your ancestors didn't have therapy, they had ochre, beads, fire, and each other. Tonight, when you think of someone you've lost, you're not doing anything strange. You're doing exactly what a human being has always done when the model of the world stops matching reality. You're trying to make it real. You're trying to make it mean something. And somewhere 100,000 years ago, someone knelt beside a body, pressed red powder into their hands, and did the exact same thing.